Hi, Dan.
Okay, thank you for that question. Yeah, no bother taking notes. I'll just throw this up on my YouTube channel, like and subscribe. Hit the bell for updates.
Alden, or sorry, Adam, what's the YouTube channel?
Adam McDonald, but like it's really hard to find, even if you get everything right. Like I'm not the influencer yet.
Well, I'll find it for you. Don't worry.
The William Cronin reading is the reading for Monday is from my YouTube channel. Yeah. Did I get a comment from Epic Gamer Grandma in the fall? Yes, I did. Is it the legit Epic Gamer Grandma? I'm pretty sure it is. Prove me wrong. I'll show you this later on. Ajit wants to know about a free giveaway. You know what? Free giveaway is at 100 subscribers. Makeup tutorial is at 350. All right. So I'm only at 67. So use your clout to get me some more subscribers and face reveal.
Elementary school.
All right, let's roll. This is our definition for environmental history. Moving on to the next thing here. I made us a little timeline. There are no dates on the timeline because if you've had me in the past, you know it's all about the relative chronology, not the absolute chronology. I'll throw in some hard and fast dates, but really what we're interested in history is the progress, the movement, what comes before, what comes afterwards. We're less interested in really the absolute dates of things. That's trivia, people. There will be a trivia question later, but trivia is lame. All right. We're going to start. This green area is the 19th century. Here's the 20th century, and here's the 21st century. So we are going to take a look at these two things, history, and down here, environmentalism. So on the top, we have some developments with history, the historical craft, with some little elements of these icons indicating things. What do the war hats signify? War, yeah. How about the gold? What does the gold signify? Throw it in the chat. The gold signify, ooh, gold rush, not gold rush, good guess. It's the something age. It rhymes with filled it age. Gilded age, yes, nicely done. Yep, gilded age. Yes. All right, so let's roll here. I kind of talked about this, but you know, the history, these are sort of divergent. And you should predict with history, you also have traditions of history that will go this direction or that direction or that direction. But what we are tracing is the historical developments that bring us closer in the historical craft to environmentalism as historians become more interested in the topic of environmentalism. All right. A history of history. I'm going to ask you to consider, think of what this person, the characteristics of this person. What does this person do you think looks like? This is the 19th century Prussian who really represents the beginning of modern history as a discipline. Throw in chat, what sort of characteristics do you think this person has?
Like a shirt on him. Can you say the question again?
I want you to picture this 19th century Prussian who developed the modern history. What are some things that you think this person looks like? Yes, an imperialist, perhaps many wives or lovers. Yes, I don't really know about this person's life. Ooh, maybe sad. Thinkers are sad, literate. How about physically? Do you have an overriding image in your face or in your about this person, what this person looked like? A woman. Oh, you know, Dan, you would hope so. Alas, it is not a woman. This is a man. Looks like a shirt on a hanger. All right, we're having trouble with this. That's okay. But some of you definitely, yes, beard. Thank you. A beard, probably a big bushy white beard. Yes. The fact that we can identify, I guess we didn't really do so well with this activity, to be quite honest. But the fact that some of us might have been able to picture such a person indicates the privileged access that elite white men had to the craft early on. And of course, that does have repercussions and problems. So when we talk about modern history, if you take any history of history course, it will likely start with Leopold Varnaranki, okay? And he said that history is recording things as it happened, all right? But he said it in German. Sorry, I don't have the German phrase. It's probably Googleable. Throw in chat. What is the problem with history as it happened?
Inconsistent narrators.
Oh, can you repeat that?
Inconsistent narrators are like biases.
Okay, biases. Yep, that's fair. Yep, I'm seeing one person's perspective. Yeah, so you have biases and perspective. Limited perspective, yes. Yeah, partialities.
You want to paint yourself in a good light, or like what you're actually your piece of work.
Yeah, precisely. So yeah, history, you know, and hopefully you've seen this written by the winners. Yeah, oftentimes it is. Partialities. Yeah, so it's very hard to characterize what happened based on the myriad of perspectives as well as, you know, the lens and biases from individuals. There's a whole lot of problems with that. So with Leopold Varnaranki, you have someone who worked for, on behalf of the state of Prussia, okay? He reaffirms the status quo with respect to political and religious power structures. He's a Christian. He says, within history, you see the hand of God. His characterizations of the Prussian state, as you can imagine, are benevolent, all right? So yes, characterizing history as it happens has a whole lot of problems. Today, historians will call this that noble dream, the attempt to reconstruct without bias what happened in the past is impossible, right? This isn't science or math. There's no formula you can use to understand the past. There's no scientific experiment you can do to recreate the past.
So is this saying that I'm a little confused. Is this saying that it's more difficult, or excuse me, that it is impossible to objectively record history as it's happening, or it's impossible to objectively record history at all?
I would say this thesis is interested in the latter. Yet, I think there is an implicit argument as well that because based on his positions here, it would also based on the myriad of perspectives that one has to consider, arriving at an objective version of even the present would be impossible. Yes. So that's called that noble dream.
Adam,
yeah.
If it's always going to be construed differently by who's ever, reading the history textbook or what have you, does it really matter if it's subjective or not?
That's maybe a good question for the audience. In my mind, I feel like, that's what makes history rich and interesting is the fact that you don't take things at face value. You need to contextualize and understand where this is coming from or what informed it, right? But yeah, I personally don't think it should matter. But yeah, there are some people and there are still popular notions today that history should do nothing else rather than relate what happened in the past, period. And that's maybe a good notion, but at the same time, really unattainable. Objectivity is pretty boring. I like that. Put that on a t-shirt, Alden. I like that. Or a cup. Sorry, I'm getting behind on chat a little bit, but I'm taking a look here now. Eva, is that a helicopter or what does this mean?
Duck.
What's that?
It's a duck.
Oh, it's a duck.
Later,
Later, man. What does the duck mean, Eva?
I like the duck emoji.
Oh, got it. I remember saying that now. Fair enough. I was gonna make a comment about that text, or that comment was foul, but I decided not to.
That's good.
All right, let's go back. I promised a quick presentation after all. All right, let's go to a history of environmentalism. And your reading will actually note this, but our first national park is Yellowstone. What other national parks, don't Google this, do you think are in the top 5? Any guesses? Any guesses? This is actually the trivia question. Yeah, when so Yellowstone was the first, 1872. What do you think the next few would have been? Yosemite? I'm getting Yosemite. So what national parks do you think might come next? Grand Canyon? Joshua Tree?
Everglades. But that seems more.
Okay, I'm moving things so I can do the drum roll again. You ready?
I can't really hear it.
Here it comes.
Why are there bubbles?
Oh, wait, hold it. 1890, 1899. So interesting note, Yellowstone is really forward thinking. We don't have another national park for almost 20 years later in 1890. And by the way, while I have your attention, 1890 is an immensely important year, because in 1890, the 1890 census officially declared the frontier closed, which means there were no longer any tracts of land that less than 2 people per 2 miles, 2 square miles were living. That's how they measured the frontier. So for the continental US in 1890, the census declared the frontier closed. And at that point, there starts to be, maybe nostalgia is not the real world, but an idea that we need to preserve these areas before they are swallowed up by the greedy elites of the Gilded Age. Thus, you have that. So what we're ultimately going to see is an attempt by state authorities to claim these public lands, so privateers can't make a whole lot of money on them. Okay, that's a little bit of a rabbit trail, an important rabbit trail. And with no further ado, here they are. Did anyone put Mount Rainier in there? Crater Lake? What? Outlier. It's so beautiful, but who would have thunk it?
Feels like they put things that are like particular.
Nice. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. I'll give you a shout out in my next bid.
Thank you. I appreciate
That's
it.
what bloggers say, vid. All right. Let's keep moving. All right. Let's take a look here at history of environmentalism. And, up to this point, we're looking at the emergence of national parks. We're recognizing that the frontier is now closed and we need to save some of these places. So really, we're looking at from Roosevelt to Roosevelt, Theodore to Franklin. We're going to see really important movements of conservation. And these really focused on these items right here. Wilderness protection. Your reading is going to talk about wilderness, the trouble with wilderness. Resource conservation, also water reclamation and irrigation. So during FDR's tenure, you have the Hoover Dam, which is, that big, massive dam. So really the epitome of water reclamation pieces. So the idea here is to rescue during this Roosevelt to Roosevelt era, which is partly overlaps with the Gilded Age, this attempt to rescue the natural world from these barons and tycoons who are using up the resources and becoming enormously wealthy, right? Rockefeller, Carnegie, to name a couple. All right. I think I'm gonna bounce to history now, the history of history. I'm bouncing back and forth here, so stay with me. So here we are now. This was Roosevelt to Roosevelt. Here we're looking at post-World War II. Ronke's view of history has really been the dominant history up until World War II. What we've learned about Ronke's history, it's very supportive of the nation. The nation is really the lens, and especially the characterizations of the benevolent nations, and sort of the use of history to instill national pride, ultimately ended in 2 world wars, okay? So historians were thinking, we need to reconsider what we talk about in history and how we frame our discipline, and think of a way to strip it of its nationalism. So the big person who was a part of this was Fernand Braudel following World War II, who said, rather than looking at the nation state, we should be looking largely at the environment. So this is actually an instructive image here. The big orange circle represents the environment. The next tier is society and economy. And then just the little part on the edge, Braudel also described this as sort of the white cap or the crest of a wave, is sort of the political developments and military activities. So in history, it's been hyper-focused on that little tiny ephemeral political developments, when what history should be looking at are these larger structures, the environment, the economy. So he reoriented historians to look at these bigger structures rather than just again, these sort of ephemeral political ups and downs. And that's what history should be looking at. And this was pretty transformative because it provided a different way to think about history, and it wasn't invested in the nation state. And it sort of was one of the mechanisms put in place following World War II, as different arts tried to figure out ways to avoid more wars, more world wars. And this is history's response. All right. So back to environmentalism. What's happening post-World War II in environmentalism? Recalling up to this point, we looked at land use as really the big important things that environments are thinking about. Now, in the 60s and 70s, we're looking more not top-down land use, but bottom-up justice issues. So people are more interested in pollution. They're interested in climate change. They're interested in legislation that has harmed the environment, all right? So here we go. If we look where we are on our little chart here, our little timeline, this part that I circled is where you get finally the emergence of environmental history, the collision of, historians don't have to talk about the nation state. They can talk about the environment and larger structures. And then when we look at sort of the grassroots activism movements and environmental justice, you have this really interesting collision of interests, and you get the emergence of environmental history, which is interested in the past. It's interested in a history of human interaction with the environment, with special attention to identifying the problems and correcting the problems and making recommendations toward the future. As you can imagine, with some maybe more traditional historians have a problem with this, and they might call this activism rather than history. And to that, some of the activists will point out the political and religious motives of Ronkian history as well. Okay, so they'll turn it back on them. Okay, so we have sort of taken history, we've taken environmentalism, and hopefully we've drawn them closer to where they connect in the 60s and 70s, and we actually have a proper discipline of environmental history. And we still are concerned about justice. And there's a range of environmental historians. Some will continue to look at land use. But as I think about what the the nuanced developments in the fields are right now largely driven by issues of environmental justice and unpacking the problems of the past and trying to correct those in the future. All right, team. I think, oh, did I finish this slide? Maybe I did. But this also brings us back to the trouble with wilderness. And this is, again, you're reading from Monday. Some will suggest that the trouble of wilderness, despite being a 1995 product of environmental history, historians will, according to some, nevertheless reproduce some of the problems that Varnaranki initiated in the 19th century. The idea of maintaining establishment, status quo power relations, both political and religious. And Cronin is going to redefine the wilderness in such a way that he hopes will liberate environmental historians from this this Varnarankian tradition that has continued to the present. All right. Are there any thoughts or questions? I realize it's not generally my style to do a whole lot of presentation, but I think on the front end, I wanted to define some terms. Moving forward, and I'll give you more information on this next week, you're going to be able to do environmental history on a chosen location. It could be that happy place that you noted earlier, or based on this presentation or the reading that you do for Monday, you might also determine that you want to look at a different place. Alden.
So what exactly, I don't, apologies for not remembering the lad's name who came after Varnaranki, was the next big person. But
Okay.
he gave the three parts of history. It was like political versus economy and society versus environment. What exactly did he define as environment? Was it truly, it's like, oh my gosh, there was a big drought this year, stuff died, or big hurricanes type thing, and then how that affected the people who were living around it?
Yeah.
Or is it, from this year to this year, these areas became even more polluted, or is it some balance?
I think it's more of the former than the latter, but looking at the way in which landscape can provide a framework to compare different civilizations. And if you have two different civilizations who share a very similar climate and topography, when culture diverges and does things that are different, it forces some very interesting questions. But yeah, what's interesting here is this is based on rate of change, right? The idea here is that the environment progresses very slowly. The economy progresses not as slowly as the environment, but slower than political developments. Here, we're living in a world much unlike Rodell's, in which the environment is changing pretty rapidly. So it is interesting to consider what this framework might look like if we acknowledge that we have a rapidly changing environment, and what that model could look like.
Adam, how would you define political developments?
So basically, the organizations of peoples, the creations of states, mechanisms that cause individuals to combine joint efforts for one reason or another, and they could be cooperative or they could be combative. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the context of a nation state, although oftentimes you get that sort of stuff. But basically, yeah. And then society and economy would be more, the larger structures of we're growing barley or our subsistence is based on salmon. These things are a little bit slower. Just want to put the causes of things in the environment. Yeah, I think I'm hearing for instance, if you live in such an environment, therefore you act in such a way. Aaliyah, is that sort of what you're getting at? This idea of an environmental deterministic piece?
Yeah, like if the model is saying that at the end of the day, it's the environment that can to explain what things are happening and why.
Yeah, I would say that this does not go to that degree. But you definitely see people like that later on. I think Jared Diamond, for instance, has been sort of regarded as someone who's very environmentally deterministic. I think there's a dialogue there that exists. But there are some people that say if A is in place, then they will do B. And I would steer people from that way of thinking. And I would say that's an outlier idea of environmental history. In general, environmental historians acknowledge that even with A and B present in different societies, C will look different, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think the environmental determinism is one of those like naughty words that if you're called that in historical circles, it's not a good thing. That's not to say that the environment doesn't influence behaviors. It does. An environment wants to look at that. Look at that dialogue. It's really a dialogue. It's dialogue between the person and the environment, not just from the environment to the person, right? And the people just act robotically. If that answers that question.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Any other thoughts or questions? But that is a field. That is a place that some people go. This idea of to what extent nature and environment really inform how people act, right? In Pacific Northwest, they built a complex hierarchical society based on salmon. That's, you know, that could be predictable in some cases and understandable.
What is your?
My view on it, I do not subscribe to environmental determinism, those sorts of things. Yeah, I think we underestimate, you know, culture gets in the way. There might be a whole lot of salmon in place, but what if like some elite group sets up a salmon god and you can't eat salmon anymore, right? Culture gets in the way, and especially belief systems with how you interact with the environment. So I'm pretty cautious with that deterministic outlook. Other thoughts. All right. All right, team. Let me see here. I always take longer than I predicted, but oh, let me go here real quick. I want to go, not here. I want to go here. All right. So you've probably seen this already, but for next time, read and respond to the trouble of wilderness. Here are the questions that I don't think they are really out there. It's basically what's Cronin's position. This one isn't really decipherable. You got to take some guesses, but based on what he's saying, a lot of his peers, environmental historians, were not picking up what he was throwing down. So guess why that might be. And then finally, what's your view? Oh, and here's the audio link.
The one place.
Hold it. And there it is. 68. Yes. All right. Like and subscribe. Wait, hold on. I'll show you Epic Gamer Grandma. If you guys want to cruise at this point, you're welcome to do that. For those of you who are like wanting to see Epic Gamer Grandma, I'll show you. Hold it. It was my artist persuasion video. And you will see in the comments. Look. Thank you, Adam. Very cool. But then you're like, that's not really Epic Gamer Grandma. So then I go to the channel. She only has one video. She's got almost 3,000 subscribers. What about her? She's got 500,000 followers on TikTok. But then you're like, that's not the real Epic Gamer Grandma. So then you go here. Hold it. Oh, man. Hold it. Oh, yeah, that's who I meant. That's who I meant. And look, this is her site. That's the video. Right here and right here. And in case you're wondering who she is, here she is. Oh, that wasn't even. Oh, that's not even a real video. Lame. All right, whatever. Prove me wrong that that's not epic gamer grammar. There she is. All right, team.
That's a claim to fame.
I know. Obviously I'm proud of it about it. You guys are free to cruise. If you are remote and have a question, stick around. I'll check in with you. And then I'll kind of float around and see all you other guys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thanks,
All right,
Adam.
thank you, team.
Thanks, Adam.
Oops.
Thanks, Adam. Have a great weekend.
All right, later.